Cubole, welcome. My name is Miguel Gavilan Molina, and this is the 420 Drumbeat. The raging COVID pandemic has had a devastating impact on Indigenous peoples and has made it incredibly challenging for everyone involved in the marijuana cannabis world. Indigenous communities have had some unusual and unique struggles in surviving the pandemic and keeping afloat in the Cannabis Revolution. The ongoing battle for social justice and the constant fight against the huge over-the-top cost to deal with licenses and permits, local, state, and federal taxes, banking restrictions and regulations. This has made it extremely difficult to succeed. The 420 Drumbeat will focus on Indigenous peoples, communities of color, the social, political, economic, and environmental impact the Cannabis Revolution has had. Gather round the drumbeat as we go across Indian lands in our push for inclusion and equity, in our continuing fight for racial justice in this ever-changing marijuana gold rush amidst the backdrop of mass incarceration and police violence, inadequate health care, lack of housing, and defunded education, medical supply shortages, and lack of food, all while the ever-increasing undeniable presence of global warming has created a daunting crisis within the indigenous world. Gather round, brothers and sisters, join us, and may the drum beat resonate within you. Let's keep hope alive. Fire up. Aho, all my relations. Today we have a special lineup. In our first segment here, we have Cannabis, Equity, and Economic Justice with Ramon Garcia. Ramon, it's good to have you back here on the panel. And I've been really excited about our guest here. He brings incredible information to us all that we all need to be aware of when it comes to the whole issue of equity. And not just that, but he's also comes from a tribal nation. It's good to have you, Ramon, and Ron with us today.
Oh, gracias, Miguel. Welcome to the 420 Drumbeat. We're here. I'm Ramon Garcia, living on native Ohlone land. I'm a Taino, out trying to connect the dots and live in this colonial structure and figure out how we work this and keep our culture and our values and our families together. And so today, this movement, this socio-economic and justice and equality movement is a movement of us reclaiming our culture, reclaiming our lands, reclaiming our music and our medicine. And that's what we're talking about, is our medicine, our herbal medicines that we've used for thousands of years that are being taken advantage of in the economic way, but not to serve the communities that have traditionally used these. So we're sitting in front of this historical house, Casa de Bandido, the mayor of the mission, and we're talking about music, culture, and cannabis that have always been connected. And so we're in a historical spot trying to give power to that. So my guest today, honestly, is the first equity, Native American equity applicant with a long Native history. And we need to give power to our perspectives. And so it's important that we receive that testimony. Native people on this land have been subjugated for a long time and not really figuring out how to use these systemic racist policies and in the ways that they move to keep our culture. And so Ron is a leader in that space, and I'll turn it over to him, let him introduce himself and his family, and learn from the wisdom.
Wow, thank you. I'm really in awe today, and thank you for having me, the mayor of the mission. This is such an honor just to be here.
More than welcome, my brother.
Yeah. Thank you as well for allowing me to be on your show. And I'm just kind of starstruck today as well. It's a lot of history here at this amazing house, and I'm just so grateful and blessed to have such a community to support me.
Yeah. So tell them about your family and where you're from. And
Yeah, my mom and dad are both Native American. My mom is Pomo from Ukiah, and my dad is Wailaki from Round Valley Indian Reservation. My last name is Leggett, where Highway 1 and 101 meet in Northern California is where Leggett Valley is. My dad's family was originally part of the Trail of Tears, the second Trail of Tears that was in that area. They took, I forget what it was, 500 and something families, and only 200 made it and survived. My dad's family was one of those 200 survivors, so I've always been taught that we're very resilient, and you know, we know the struggle, and we're definitely involved in our Native community still to this day. I represent as a first generation urban Native American, because my brother and I were both born in Oakland. My parents were part of the 1956 Indian Relocation Act, where they were relocated to Oakland. That was one of the 6 or 7 original relocation cities. And then my parents had 2 first-generation urban Native American sons. We were both born in Oakland Hospital in the Fruitvale District. My mom still lives there. My brother received life in prison at 17 years old when I was 12 years old, and my brother's currently in Pelican Bay 39 years later. Every time he gets caught with a joint or something like that, some form of contraband, he loses parole hearing, and things just keep moving further and further and further. You know, he did something really stupid at, you know, just turned 17 years old, and, you know, he paid for it with his life. And personally, you know, I've been around cannabis for a really long time. Currently almost 52 years old. And I remember when my brother was first starting to get into trouble, one of my first experiences was helping him sew a joint into the seam of his jacket before he went to CYA, California Youth Authority. One of my first memories when I think back how far I've been involved with cannabis. And so that's a pretty long time. The way I've kind of evolved or came about this is really ironic. I was the executive director for the Oakland Food Pantry for probably the last 8 or 9 years. Co-founded it, and at the peak we used to serve 500,000 pounds of food to our community in West Oakland, the estimated value of over $750,000. I was at a city meeting one day, and someone said, "Hey, Ron, you might want to be interested and take a look at this," and they slid a piece of paper over to me face down. And I put it in my folder, and, you know, we had our meeting about feeding people in the city, and I left the meeting, went home, and I opened up this thing, and there it was, the equity cannabis thing. And I said, you know, I'm not quite too sure about this. You know, I don't want to put ruin my reputation and so-called come out, right? Because I'm like this person who coaches youth basketball and works in the community, and, you know, just has a really good reputation. And I said, I'm not quite sure. So I talked to my wife, and she goes, I don't even think we qualify. And I said, well, let's take a look at it. We went down the list, and it was check, 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 all the way down the list. And we looked at each other, and we were like, oh my God. And I said, well, if I don't at least put my name in the hat, I'll kick myself for the rest of my life. So I at least have to put my name in the hat. And through the support of my wife and my family, they were like, do what you got to do. We support you. Good luck. You know, whatever we're here.
so
Sure enough, in 2018 in Oakland, I won a dispensary license. I had a lot of difficulty finding the right funders or the people who I want to work with, who represent a lot of the values that I share and represent. And quite frankly, I've been approached by pretty much all the wrong people, and everybody was giving me predatory loans and predatory deals, and it just wasn't worth it. So I still have this license. I'm shopping it around still. But in the meantime, I opened up my non-volatile manufacturing company, which is chiefing. I played a word game, you can say. I tied into my native history, to my roots, and then if you Urban Dictionary chiefing, it means to hog the joint or to not pass it. So I decided I would go with that name. Before I said launch that name, I reached out to a lot of people in our community, the AIM West leader, Tony Gonzalez. I spoke to Marty Wakazu at the Native Health Center in Oakland. And I just spoke to, rest in peace, my good friend Janet King. I spoke to a lot of people and asked for their blessing that if I used the name Chiefing, that it would be okay with my community. And everywhere I went, everybody said it was okay, and we think it's a great thing. And being the first is also a great honor, but it's also a huge responsibility as well. Yes. And originally I didn't really understand the responsibility aspect of it, and making sure that I do good deals, that my company represents my values and what my mom taught me, and what I should be doing. And my mom, of course, was one of the first people that I spoke to. And it was funny because when I submitted to the city for the dispensary, I said, man, I'm gonna have to tell my mom. and my wife said, well, you haven't even won anything yet. I said, yeah, but I plan on winning, and I'd rather have her hear it from me than one of her friends at the senior center or something that says, hey. So I called my mom, and she was a little hesitant at first, and then I explained it to her, and I said, hey, well, let me take you around to a couple stores in Oakland. So we visited all the different dispensaries in Oakland, and then my mom's from Ukiah, and I don't know, a couple months later, we ended up in Ukiah for a funeral, and we visited some of the dispensaries in Ukiah, and then my mom's 80, just turned 82. So my mom's been taught all this time that cannabis is bad, right? My brother's doing life in prison, so I was taken out of public school and put in private school. So I was the son that wasn't going to go this route, right? And here I am. I've received a decent education, and I'm I think a decent person in our community. And here's Ron Leggett, now the cannabis operator, cannabis license holder, and the only Native American in the state to actually make it through the process and have a license. So it's been a really, really fun road. It's been a roller coaster, but roller coasters are fun as well, as much as they can be scary. And I just been riding the ride and enjoying it, and meeting some really, really good people through this whole process, including Ramon and the mayor and everybody else that I met today. I don't want to leave anybody out, but everybody here has been so good to me today. So I really appreciate it. It makes me feel like family. Thank you.
Where do you see, like, through that experience, where do you see, like, the economic justice in this? How do you see it? Because, like, for me, it's been a challenge to get into Native communities and express what opportunity this is. Even in the Black community and Latino community, we've been oppressed by the propaganda for so long that there's so much fear in our communities of this, that we can't reach our resources. And so, like, here you have somebody who's a license holder. He should be able to reach some resources and land and property and be able to open his store. And because of that propaganda in the 50 years plus of the war on drugs, we can't reach our own resources. And so this is kind of what this is all about, is trying to reclaim that culture that we have to explain back to it. So, like, again, back to the question, where do you see the economic justice and opportunity in this for your folks, for your family, and for your people?
Well, I think Prop 64 made it pretty clear initially when they put the language in there that cut the tribes out. I spoke with some people who had a front row seat with Prop 64 and presented my case to them, and they presented that case at the state level. But unfortunately, the systemic part of it is real, as people say. We're the only people in the state of California that if you live on federal land and you're from a tribe that you cannot participate. In a way, I'm fortunate because, like I said, both my parents were relocated to Oakland, and I grew up in a tough district and where no one looked like me, and I still live in a tough district where no one looks like me, but maybe that will all change through this. So there is some form of economic justice I see being presented, but as far as being able to obtain it is another story. Oakland has a great equity program. I think the minds behind it developed something really good, and the intent is really there. But the hurdles and the barriers that are built just into the system, into access to money or to grant funds, or to navigate that whole system, is a whole nother animal that I don't think a lot of us even anticipated. And for a lot
on purpose. It's on purpose. It's set up that way for us not to succeed. And so that's where this new movement, this economic movement, we've protested, we've burned down, we've tried to change policy, and here we are 500 plus years later, and we're still struggling from the same oppressor, from the same things, whether it's the Native community, the Latino community, the Black community, the Asian Pacific Islander community. We're seeing the repercussions of systemic racist policies and what they've done to us over times and how they've changed us. And so this is our opportunity to kind of take that back, and it's the call to reclaim those things that were taken from us, and you're that prime example. And so, like, from here on, what we're trying to create here with these elders here, and with being able to broadcast this to you is show you what the network is, what our real resources are, and educate our community on why it's so important to take it back. And so we have an opportunity now where part of the war on drugs and colonial capitalism, it made us the consumers. We are the consumers. Without us, they don't exist. And the moment we recognize this power and use it to fuel our communities and fuse it to fuel those people that have been holding our culture down and spreading that information, that's the moment that we take this next step and we really start reclaiming. So I want to thank you, Ron Leggett, for telling your story. It's very powerful, and it's hard being that example. It's hard coming out there and putting your story out there because of that oppression. Like, we get it from our own people because we've been hurt for so long. Like, we expect it from others, but when it's your own folks, and so you are that example. Through that experience, you're going to be able to, your folks are going to be able to relate to you, and you'll be able to spread that knowledge to the younger folks that can take this and really use this as a movement to reclaim what they took from us for the past 500 plus years, at least a piece of it where we control our own destiny and fate. So I appreciate you. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, Sir Richard Segovia, for blessing us with your space here so that we can spread this knowledge. I hope.
Thank you so much for sharing that insight, Ramon, and for hosting this segment here. That was the voice of Ramon Garcia, and of course our special guest, Ron Leggett, on the Cannabis Equity and Economic Justice segment. From that, we're going to take a little pause here.
Good? Is that good?
Medicina.
Mm-hmm.
Part of what the attempt here on today's show is, as I think Ramon and both Ron touched upon it, and that is we are here for the cultural advancement of our peoples. And I put that with an S, because we're all indigenous to some lands. We're all natives to some region on the earth. But this show here is to bring all of humanity together and create a new America, create a new mindset, not based on fear and chaos, violence, and domination, but based on peace and love and sharing the sacred herb. With that, our very own cultural ambassador of San Francisco's Mission District, aka also known as the mayor, alcalde de la Misión, is a very good lifelong friend of mine and compañero, and that is Richard Segovia. He, along with Pedro Reyes, will be sitting in for Sandra Lemos, and also Xochitl Moreno will join Richard. Pedro, or as we call him, Don Pedro, is a technical director for myself and La Onda crew from the Pacifica Network's La Onda Bajita show. And he's joining here because he himself has based his world around the cultural advancement of our peoples. So, Richard, good to be back here on the second program of the 420 Drumbeat, and I'm glad that you're together with Don Pedro.
Well, me and Pedro have a good relationship together. You know, we've been working KPFA. Me and Don Pedro working it out. You know, we've been bringing live bands, basically, you know, to put the word out there about what's going around the world, right? I mean, you know, basically, we want to have a voice, and everybody knows when you're on radio, you got a voice. People will listen. People will hear what you're coming from, and I've been honored to be able to work with Pedro and also your son Falcon. You know, I mean, I'm pretty honored, and I'm honored to be here, and I want to thank everybody for being here. You know, enjoying the beautiful Casa Bandido mural, the dedication, and we honored today Bill Graham today. Bill Graham right up here on the house. We honor him, and I just want to say one thing, man. I mean, marijuana saved my life. You know, being a cancer victim, and got me off the pills, got me off all the pills they were giving me, and made me put weight on. So I'm a true believer in that this is medicine. It's medicine. It's one, you know, and it's the spirit medicine. It comes from the ground. It's not pharmaceutically made. It's not processed. This is the real deal. So this means a lot to me. So yeah, I smoke weed, you know, and I love it, you know, and it makes me feel good. You know, I love it. You know, so my thing is to be able to work with the music, right?
Well, musica, the thing about music, if I may interject, it's the universal language. It's the one language that all humans can relate to at some point or another. And as indigenous peoples, the drum, which you, the
Right.
master
Right.
timbalero,
Right.
conguero,
Yeah.
knows exactly what that
Yeah, the
resonates.
drum, you know, I had the opportunity to look at every instrument that was out there before, you know, guitar, tried it for a while. Played a little bit of keyboards, tried it for a while. You know, grabbed the bass, hurt my fingers. Trumpet and stuff, hurt my lips. And then one day, I got on the drum. I started playing the drum, and that was almost 53 years ago. And it just did something to me. You know, the boom, the heartbeat, being the heart of the music. You know, the drumming is the essence of music to me. We set the pace, we set the groove, we want it laid back, we want to bring in the fire. We control all the dynamics of music. Everybody else to me is on top of it. We're the ones that create the meat and potato of music. And the drum to me has always been a spiritual thing. It's been something that I played with the gods. You know, I mean, I hate to say it, but I've had some of the best times playing music, you know, on peyote and mushrooms. I mean, I hate to say it, but it just opens up your spirit. And, you know, to me, honest to God, after that happened to me, I was never the same. It just does something. I found myself embracing my instrument, not just playing it, but embracing that drum and listening to the rhythm of it, you know, the beating of it, you know, when you get out there with music and you have percussion and everything to it, makes people dance. The percussion, the drum, right? I mean, what do you think, Pedro?
No,
I mean,
for real. You know, bringing it back to that, actually, you know, the fact that the Dragon Wars, for example, you know, ends up targeting festivals, for example, right? Like, but then, like, what happens is that when people go out and bring creative spaces, create a safe space, you know.
Uh-huh.
No one gets into a fight, no
No,
one dies,
no.
nobody gets hurt, you know, and next thing you know, you have police breaking it down, right?
Exactly.
And because supposedly there's illegal drugs there, right? And so the idea is, again, most of the time we know during the 80s, 70s as well, that there was the drug on wars, and that was not the drug on wars, it was drug on marijuana.
Right.
Right, and so marijuana ended up, you know, being the target drug, so to speak, of
Right.
the 70s for the FBI, the CIA, DEA.
Well, let me tell you, back
right?
in the 70s, to be truthfully honest with you, back in the 70s, I got in trouble for marijuana. Right? I went and I went to court. They put me in jail. I got out. I got diverted. You know, I had to be on probation for a little bit of marijuana. This was like, I want to say, maybe like 1972,
Word.
right? And so I know what it was. Lately, I just got a thing in the mail that they were dropping that because of the legalization of marijuana, and it was a medicine for me. It was back pain. You know, my grandmother used to tell me, Mijo, can you get me the stems? Could you give me the and she would put the stems in a bottle with alcohol and castor oil, and she would let it ferment for a month, and then she would put it on her aches and pains, and I mean, come on, that means she was doing CBD, you know, since aches and pains, and that's what she was using. She was using that form of it though, and you know, my mother, well, don't give that to my mother, right?
You know what?
You know, and then when I was diagnosed with the stage 4 cancer, they took me outside the hospital, down in the hallway. The doctor let me smoke a joint. And, you know, my mother, she was alive right now. She'd been 104 years old. The guy would come to my house and bring me pot. She would pay for it. All I could tell you is to save my son's life.
Well, you know what,
So,
Richard?
you know, huh?
And then basically you have the CIA, DEA, and they're the ones bringing in the other drugs. You know
Right.
what I'm saying?
Right.
Well, we're still trying to grow our
Yeah.
sacred plants here and be able to use them. They're infiltrating our communities, bringing in this epidemic of drug use or, you know, drug
Just-
overdoses, right? And it's like, it's still going on today, right? So when we use
Okay,
music,
okay.
it's to create a safe space.
Okay.
It's to be able to
Okay.
have spaces like this where we can go and jam out and know that we can smoke weed and be able to, like, you know, just enjoy the evening or the afternoon with each other and not be able to have to worry about, like, you know, what's going on out there, right? So
Right,
the
that's
reality-
why, as a musician of so many years, I feel that we need a genre of music that's built for marijuana, a culture. Build it. Me, I have a friend of mine, Jack, that lives in Texas, comes over there with this thing, tells me about herbcore. Herbcore is going to be a culture of music that is written, a genre just written for marijuana. La cucaracha, stuff like that. And what you could do is you can put it on a little drive that you can put it in your car, and there you go. Roll up your little grifa, put this in the car. You're listening to all music about our culture. Reggae music is big with the marijuana. Bob Marley, could you imagine that? If we did that, if we took a genre and wrote it behind culture, reggae culture, marijuana, right? Latin rock, marijuana, different styles and genres of music. I think that's why we're here.
And you know,
I think
in the-
that's why we're here, because we're standing up for who we are, our culture, and we're going to let people know that as Latinos, we got different names for marijuana that'll be our cultures. Like, for instance, the galleta thing that I'm thinking, you know, there's so much more that comes with that, right? The culture of it. That would give us, to me, or whatever we do, to get the money to be able to make us Latinos have that money so we could grow with the money and make more and become bigger and bigger village, right? I mean, exactly, right? Take that money and not put it in your pocket. Invest it into our kids. Invest it into our culture, you know, right?
I'm remembering Marijuana Boogie right now. The Sutsu Pachuco Marijuana
Well,
Boogie.
let me tell you, after we finish here, I got a band set up in the backyard. We got some music for you. We took a few beats of some stuff that's been done in the past, and I got my friend Jay Stone from the Funkinauts. Him and Ace that are here, that came here to back us up. Say, I'll come and pay for you for nothing, brother. Let's do this. You know, they have their own radio show, but the thing is that Jay got this beautiful song we're gonna play today. It's a funky. It's called Mary, M-A-R-Y, W-A-N-N-A, marijuana. Right? So we're gonna play that today. So whatever you want to do, let's talk to our brother here and see what you think about that and how me and you could work together as a family and figure out how we can launch all that.
That sounds awesome, and that's part of the idea of bringing the message and the conciencia through music, and so that folks can really understand the medicinal ways, the understanding that beyond criminalization of marijuana, because of the fact that there is more to that meets the eye, So
Right.
when
Well,
we're talking about this, we want people to understand that, that there is more to
Just
really understanding the marijuana and
Right.
being informed and what it can do for our communities as well. Not now, but just in the future and what it has done in the past as well.
Well, like when we were in the circle over there and we are talking, and Gavilan was talking about the marijuana thing. In the last two things that we've had here with this thing with our buddies here doing this, I've learned so much about my culture, about the whole marijuana thing that I didn't even know. I never thought, wow, you're right, man. It came back from Mexico for hundreds and hundreds of years where it started. I remember the Acapulco Gold, the Panama Red, the Michoacan, right? I mean, go way back. I mean, even way further. And when I heard him talking that, I was like, he's absolutely correct.
Yes,
we were
right.
the first ones that created this monster when we did with the healing and the medicines. My grandmother used it. His pop, the family probably did it a long time ago. And I never looked at it that way until you brought that up. How heavy the Latinos have been when it comes to marijuana.
Yeah, and
Right?
again, that goes back to what we're talking about, when we got folks talking about folks being imprisoned for marijuana, right? And still not being let out because of the fact that they might have gotten other injunctions in there or
Right,
whatever the
right.
case, right? But that's how it all started. I mean, that's what the drug war was. Basically, find any excuse to put people in their cages, and then basically from there on, they're basically stuck in the system. There's no way out, basically, right?
Well, if I may interrupt here, there is a big movement for expungement, and that is the releasing of those incarcerated for minor non-violent offenses around marijuana. We had a great conversation yesterday with Omar Figueroa, who just came out with his book, California Cannabis Law and Regulations 2021. Really important book to look at. But the thing about, I think, marijuana is that it has had a cultural impact.
Big.
It is the one particular thing or plant that has brought all races together. We all, and not only for medicinal purposes, but now there's all new generations that are doing for recreational. Smoking bud, and staying away from liquor,
medicinal.
staying away from alcohol, and staying away
Opiates.
from chemical drugs, which run rampant in our communities.
Sure.
So with marijuana, it's something that's like neutralizes all that. And
Healer.
for those that do it for recreational, it makes them a little mellower. For those that use it to heighten their senses and be open for creative energies of the universe, it really is empowering and
Right.
eye-awakening and light. And then there's some of us that use it for pain and pain management because we refuse to give in to white chemical drugs, which is the pharmaceutical industry. But back to our reality here and the cultural revolution that marijuana has caused, not only in music, but in theater, in poetry, even on the walls. And we have had those that have talked about cannabis. One that comes off the top of my head immediately is, of course, Cheech Marin. Coming out as his rocker and talking about pot, meaty, marijuana. Then we have, contemporaries like Snoop Dogg, who has been one of the biggest promoters of marijuana. Then you got Cypress Hill, from down south, that talks about the herb. And then you have multiple. I know you've got about 60 artists in one of your collections here that talk about cannabis. So there is this revolution happening.
Yes.
On that point, today, Mayor, you've got a set of music
Yeah.
that you're going to be performing.
Yes.
And I think for some of us will be the first time, which is really exciting. So after this segment here,
Funkin' Knots.
before you guys wrap it up,
Yeah.
we'll be continuing the show, but with the music happening live in the back.
Right. Sure.
And
Yeah.
but giving it back to you as a cultural
Well,
ambassador.
well, you know, what really surprised me, see, you got to remember back in, like I said earlier, 1973, I went to jail for this. Cost my mother $10,000 in court fees. And you're talking 1972, 73. My career was just starting ready to go. Now I'm sitting on a felon, ready to go to prison. Got me out in jail, thank God, but it cost my money, a lot of money to get me out of that problem. And then what did I get? Diversion. Well, they put it in an envelope and they just put it under there and shove it underneath the rug.
Right.
Right? Never did I ever think after that I would be able to walk into a store or sit right here, right in front of my house, and smoke a joint.
Right.
Right? Man, if I did that back in the 70s, what we're doing right now, we'd all be
Face
going
the
to prison
concrete.
right now. All of us, right? So to be able to see this transition is blowing my mind. And what really hurts me more is us, the ones who started it, got it going, not get anything for it.
That's going to change.
That's got to turn around. That's why we're all here.
In those
We're building,
moments.
like you said, we're building a pueblo here, man.
You know,
You know, we're building a big pueblo. We're gonna have this town with us all here, man. The more we give it, the more we do it. Gavilan, I take my hat off to you, man, because man, this vision that you have with Drum 420, genius, man, genius, bro.
Oh, Pedro.
Oh.
yeah, you know, I was gonna say, in the '90s, bro, I actually ended up getting beat up by the police as well, because I had an eighth of weed on me.
Wow.
And basically ended up getting taken to the waiting tank, you know, and basically trying to put me into the system, right? And being like, you know, you ain't got no rights. You're a stoner. You
Yeah.
drug dealer, marijuana dealer,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
it's just kind of like, nah, I'm not. You know, I'm going to college. I'm a father. I'm actually doing what I need to do, and that actually, you know, till this day, I'm not able to be like, yo, I'm gonna smoke some weed right here because of that fact,
Right.
because of that trauma, because of the fact that, you know, the police still target brown and black people, you know, and Asians too, you know, and the fact that, you know, we walk around. I was just talking to Ron, and I was letting him know, you know, I don't feel comfortable smoking around little kids like people do drinking beer.
Yeah, you just
know?
don't do
And
it.
that's even worse because again, and
Cultural.
it ends up what, abuse at home, violence, you know, domestic
just like-
violence, you know.
Just like the young kid that I got, Adrian Zuniga. He wanted to come today and play. He's only 14. I said, kid, you gotta stay home.
But yeah,
You know, I mean, you know, you'll one of these days.
Yeah.
Just not right now. You're only 14.
so just being able to be comfortable with that,
Right.
kind of like another part of another cultural
journey.
entity we need to win back or take back and know that we're
Well,
not
this is where it's gonna start.
creating a
Yeah.
you know, a gateway to drugs because of the fact that even from my own experiences and my homeboys' experiences, I know the fact that when they smoke weed, that got them down from whatever they were doing.
Right.
That got them up from wherever they were going down from, you know, and basically that kept them away from being able to go crazy, basically, you know. If they didn't have marijuana, they would have overdosed.
It's like, what do you
Right.
think what do you think the people in prison are getting their drugs from?
But that's the last thing they were
You
saying.
know, the
Where's
pinche, what,
weed
the
at,
Huda,
yo?
man, they're
I
bringing,
need
the
to
Huda's
go
bringing it
down,
in.
you know?
They're keeping all the fucking Huda, let me get him, boom, 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 you know?
Well-
The Huda's doing it, man, you know
Yes,
that?
yeah, we know that, and that's going to change. There's going to be reform
Right.
everywhere. Right now, the whole country is poised on looking at itself, for there's a reckoning about humanity and race relations. And most of us here, we are survivors
Right.
of genocidal and a system of dominance that have been here for a couple of centuries. But with this idea here, we are going to beat the drum beat. And wherever the drum beats, we shall liberate. We shall liberate. That said, we're going to end it up here right now with the mayor of the Mission, a.k.a. Richard Segovia, and Pedro Pepe Reyes, Don Pedro. We'll wrap this segment up. We'll be back again for a third edition of this Cultural Revolution and continue this conversation of the cultural, musical impact that cannabis has had on our societies. Thank you both.
You're
Gracias
welcome.
for
Thank
being
you.
with us.
Yeah.
And now we're going to go to a little break, and we'll be coming back with our very own Nina Parks, who will also be addressing cannabis equity and economic justice, co-host with Ramon Garcia. Welcome back, Nina. It's good to have you here. And I know you got a very special guest here
Yes.
from the community here in this area,
Yep.
which will bring some revelation into the stories. And the stories are what captures the moments of both not only our pursuit of happiness and peace and balance, but also our struggles and suffering that happen and the obstacles we face for being from communities of color and indigenous nations. Welcome back, Nina. It's good to have you here. And as always, aho.
Aho. Thank you as always for having me here and including me in this wonderful series that you guys have going on and being able to continue to talk story about the plant and what it means to our community. So I'm very grateful to be sitting here with Reginald Wise, Sir Reginald Wise.
Thank you. I'm trying my best to live up to that name.
Yeah, and you are. I'm here with you because you are a San Francisco native and you've been here in the SF Mission District for over 20 years. So this is your heart and this is your home. I wanted to ask you, when you were growing up here in San Francisco, what was the sentiment around like cannabis and marijuana when you were growing up here in San Francisco?
Well, I mean, that was a while ago, and like you said, the sentiment when I was growing up was not just that it was a bad thing. It was like you were a bad person for doing it. Like you were just. It wasn't just like, oh, you smoke weed and you're bad. Like something bad's gonna happen to you. You know, you're gonna end up stealing. You're gonna end up homeless. You're gonna. It was just.
It's
like,
the whole reefer madness thing.
It was
into
the
people's,
devil's lettuce.
in people's
That's
heads.
what it was.
Wow.
And my mom was really religious, and so outside of just trying to understand what it was for myself, you know, you had all the stigma that you were doing something that you know your parents really didn't like, and that you know, and it was really against the community at the time, you know. So
More like the rebel's weed versus the devil's weed,
yeah,
right?
yeah, there you go.
Right?
There's definitely a better name for it. So it had a real bad stigma, and you know, basically it was always presented like nothing good could come out of it. You know, which was
Right.
completely the opposite of what we learned today. So
Right. And so what was the moment that you shifted your own consciousness around cannabis? Like what was that moment like?
the moment that shifted my consciousness was I saw a Third World album cover.
Past the Dutchie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I looked at the album cover and I saw like these black and brown people, and they had long hair and they were happy. And I started listening to the music, and they were talking about weed was a sacrament, and you know, and it was the healing of the nations, and it was the complete opposite of what I had been told. And so I was like, you know, I got to try this out for myself, because I mean, it contradicted everything that I ever heard. And once I tried it, I realized that they were right. Like my world didn't fall apart. You know, I actually. I felt like I became less shallow, and I know I was sharing this with you earlier, and I don't even want to tear up on
camera, but it's okay. Be real about it, because this is the real
when
story.
I first smoked,
Yeah.
I actually realized the connection of like God and nature, the beauty in nature, the connection of how we are a part of this whole, and
Oh,
it
that
all
is a
just
whole
fit
different.
together,
That's
like,
a whole
clicked
different
into
vibe
place.
than what they said before, right?
Oh man, I
That's the
didn't go
opposite.
crazy. I wasn't running down the street. I wasn't trying to steal anything from anybody.
You were more connected.
I was pretty happy at the moment. I didn't really.
So that was the beginning of your
that was the
personal
beginning of my
relationship with it. And so like for you, it's beautiful, and thank you for sharing, because I feel for myself as well is that it's a very spiritual connection. It's not like yes the industry, right? So because that's what we're talking about also is economic justice, right?
Truly.
Like because of the past prohibition laws that existed, they really targeted certain groups to block folks from achieving financial freedom, right? So it's
Sure.
like, like slapping felonies on people, making it hard to get loans and or jobs because of it, and all of those other things. So now that we are all moving into what California is starting to consider like one of their fifth pillars of the economy is cannabis. Where are you seeing like the intersection between your personal relationship and you as a spiritual steward of the plant, right? And then also being able to bridge access to folks, because you said you launched a business in the middle of the pandemic and took it online because that the healing of the plant needed to be accessible to your community at large. So you want to tell me about that project, and has it been a financial opportunity for you?
Thank you
Yeah.
for all that, and you're right. And we all know the history and the imbalance of things and how that plays out and how that imbalance actually affects us today. So we won't reiterate that too much. But what happened was I was actually going to start a brick and mortar. The pandemic started, and we went online. We started making products in that same vein of being the stewards of the plant, the stewards of the healing of the nation, with making topicals, and we have our own flower now, soap, bubble bath, muscle rub, things of that nature, because folks were stressed. COVID was stressful, the economy was stressful, life was stressful.
Word.
We had, the police shootings.
Oh my God.
So
the
all
worst.
that actually fueled what we were already doing as a product line, but we decided we needed to have a better avenue to let people have access to something that was going to relieve some kind of stress or tension. And whatever we could do that, we know we're not going to save the world, but if we can alleviate stress, if we can alleviate tension by the use of this natural plant
Yes.
that does really so much more than it's given credit for, then that's our warm and fuzzy. That's what makes us feel good. When people come up and say, oh, the product helped me feel better, the product helps me get through my day, the things that you do are actually helping me, be a little bit less stressed in my daily life. That's why we're here. That's why we do what we do. That's what it's all about for us.
Straight up, because I was reading something. What was it? It was a book called like Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers or something of that nature, and it was talking about how stress is one of the number one killers of or the number one thing that makes us ill more than anything. It's the level of stress, and it builds like the acidity in our bodies and all of the other things. So
Exactly.
the,
So if
like,
you can reduce the
targeted
stress level,
relief is
then
big.
you keep yourself healthy, or at least
Yeah.
it creates an environment for health to promote itself.
And that's like the heart of like the Rasta belief, right?
Exactly.
It's like the good eating,
ITAL food, ITAL thoughts, like you said, herb being the healing of the nation, having a positive meditation in your mind, all that's so important.
Can you share a little bit about like what ITAL thoughts are?
ITAL thought, just good thoughts, good vibes, good energy, thinking positively about yourself, thinking positively about others, thinking positively about the world. I think my man said it best earlier. For a lot of people, this is Easter and that special day or whatever. If you could break down all those principles into three things, it would be, love and take care of yourself because you're special.
Yep. Word.
Treat everybody else like you want to be treated. And take care of your immediate environment that same way.
Baseline, like
Now,
those
if
three
everybody
things.
did that, we'd be living right about now.
Word, and all of that goes into your products,
Exactly.
and so that's the ITAL thoughts are infused in your products as well as the cannabis CBD.
Everything, and as we know, Dr. Emoto showed that life has memory, and the thoughts that you put out actually have a molecular manifestation on
Straight
things
up.
that you do.
Say that, Dr. Emoto. Yes, R.I.P. Dr. Emoto.
So all
Word.
that to say that all of this is important. The vibration, the energy, the products you use, the energy that you put into what you're making, the community that you create.
Yeah.
It's all needed to help heal us, heal others, and heal our planet.
So can you tell the audience, for those who need to help find you and find your healing, how can they find you?
Oh, that would be great. Thank you. We are at the sunspotcbd.com. Bam, right there. Trying to represent us well.
That's right.
Got a little swag too. But the bottom line for us is quality and making sure that you feel different, and that different, it means better. And so if we've done that job, then we've done our job.
That's what's up. And Reggie, you are wise.
Oh, well, thank you. Mama would be proud.
For sure. Thank you for taking your time with us this Sunday.
Hey, thank you for having me. Big props to the host and everybody, the crew.
Yep. Word. Thank you, guys. Right on.
Right on.
Turn it over now to our special guest and anchor for the Marijuana in the Law, and that is Omar Figueroa, longtime activist, advocate, author, writer, and lawyer expertise on the issues of cannabis and its impact on the social justice scene and its effect on communities of color. Welcome, Omar. It's good to have you here. Always good to reconnect with you. It has been a long road here. We're looking over 100 years. And things really picked up, I believe, with the prohibition after 1914, and of course in the 1930s, and then you had the 1940s, and all the way into the 60s, where cannabis began to cross over cultural, social lines. What has happened in this time, these 100 years, and where has it led to up to today, 2021?
It's a pleasure to be here, Miguel. And, I think what's happened is like an evolution in how our human society is dealing with this plant that we've had a millennium-long relationship with. And for most of human history, humans have coexisted with cannabis, and it's been a synergistic relationship where humans, really benefit from cannabis as a form of nutrition and for other uses. And that's been taken away by a prohibition, which was recently enacted. The information I have is that in 1913, there was a Poison Act in California that outlawed preparations of hemp or local weed. And it was really aimed at people of color in California. There was a Sikh community in the Central Valley, as well as Mexicanos and also Californios in California who had been using cannabis for centuries. And so the reason it was put in, I think was really to keep the prohibitionists busy, and it really has been a disaster. First, what happened in the 1950s, they escalated possession of any marijuana to a felony. And then in the 1970s, it was downgraded possession of less than an ounce to a misdemeanor with no jail time and a $100 maximum fine. That was the Moscone Act. Then, but cultivation of a single plant still remained a felony, and possession for sale of a single gram or any amount whatsoever still remained a felony. And that really gave law enforcement incredible discretion in felonizing harmless activities such as sharing cannabis with friends or trying to grow cannabis for one's own medical use. It was not until 1996 that the voters of California passed the Compassionate Use Act, which was the first legislation in the world to legalize medical marijuana in the modern era. And that really was the genesis of the cannabis movement that we see now. And the roots of the California cannabis movement are activists. Many of them were from deeply marginalized communities, people of color, as well as LGBTQ communities, who really were using cannabis as a last resort medicine, that could help when nothing else would. And so It was a very inspiring time. Like we were both activists during that time, and it was extremely inspiring to help people who literally depended on medical cannabis for their lives. And cannabis, it really brought into sharp relief like what a life-saving medicine cannabis can be. But now we've entered a different era. In 1996, we had the Compassionate Use Act, and then in 2004 we had the collectives and cooperatives. It was Senate Bill 420, and up until then, most medical cannabis operations were really small. It was like a caregiver and a few patients, and there were a few outliers like Dennis Perron, who had collectives consisting of hundreds or thousands of patients, and the courts rejected the idea that somebody could be a caregiver for hundreds or thousands of people. So the legislature remedied this defect by passing Senate Bill 420, which allowed for the collective or cooperative defense. And at that point, patients and caregivers were allowed to associate collectively for the purpose of cultivating cannabis. There was some interpretations that said that they were not supposed to make a profit, but the law did not really define what was a profit. And for the cops, any money coming in, known as revenue, they consider that a profit. But that's not the definition of profit. Revenue is not profit. Revenue minus expenses equals profit. So many times there was all these arguments in court about whether this medical marijuana was for profit or not for profit. And, I defended hundreds of those cases. But it really did get tiring because it was people had their paperwork, and sometimes the paperwork was expired, and the cops were looking through stacks of paperwork, hunting for expired recommendations. And sometimes, the people are like, oh, well, it's expired in that stack, but we can get one that's not expired because the people had it all along. They forgot to update, not a big deal. And so it was really unregulated. And what was cool about that is we had a laissez-faire capitalistic system in California where for medical cannabis, we have a huge diversity of products. The barriers to entry were next to none. Anybody could start growing medical cannabis for others. All they needed were patients with medical recommendations, and usually the recommendations were the proxy. There were no state permits. There were few, if any, local permits for collectives or cooperatives. So people just had a stack of scripts. But then the legislature decided to tame the wild tiger, as they put it, of medical cannabis. And the way they did that is by putting an expiration date on the medical collective and cooperative defense. This happened in 2015. And then they put in this regulatory framework for medical cannabis. At the same time, the voters are like, we are just sick of cannabis prohibition. We want to have just repeal prohibition and enact legalization. And there were numerous initiatives that were competing for funding. And the one that got the most funding was the one that was written and paid for by Sean Parker, who was an internet billionaire from the old, music sharing days. And his initiative became Proposition 64, and Prop 64 became the new legalization law, which has mandatory distributors. There can be no direct sales from growers to patients or adults anymore. Like in the medical marijuana days, the growers sold straight to the patient. And, going to events like the Emerald Cup, that was a beautiful thing. You would see all the growers lining up their tables, and they were having interactions like a huge farmer's market, the biggest cannabis farmer's market you could imagine. And it was the direct-to-consumer sales. Right. Well, this new system put in mandatory distributors in the middle, who are the tax collectors, as well as mandatory testing, which is the only thing I like about this new system, is that they do require testing for a wide variety of pesticides and toxins, and cannabis is far cleaner than most food or water that we are exposed to. And so because all of it is medical grade in California. There is no distinction between medical grade and adult use grade. All of cannabis in California is medical grade. That's a good thing. It does not obscure the benefits of cannabis that's been contaminated with pesticides and other, things. And in general, like now we no longer have the laissez-faire system. Now we have a highly regulated system with literally hundreds of pages of laws and regulations. And my latest book, I think now numbers like more than 600 pages of laws and regulations. And it's a very Byzantine and intricate system that's been set up, and it has not been easy for the people who formerly had very minimal barriers to entry. All you needed were a few seeds and willpower to really grow in the old system, and now like you need that as well as lots of capital, a business plan, and it's become very different.
Well, that brings up that whole issue of equity and economic justice. We're going to leave it there right now, and we'll be coming back to you on the following program, an episode, which we will be talking about just that, the social economic impact, and of course what is happening now. Where both Congress and the Senate, the U.S. Senate, is looking at cannabis and possibly reforming the laws. Thank you, Omar, for being with us on the segment here on the scales of justice, cannabis and the law. We'll be returning for our next show, and we'll be continuing the conversation on the social equity, economic impact of marijuana. Thank you.